From the dusty fields of Bethlehem to the golden throne of Israel, one man's journey defied all odds. A shepherd boy turned king, David's life is a tale of bravery, betrayal, and redemption. This is not just a story of faith but a testament to the power of resilience. Join us as we uncover the incredible, breathtaking story of David, the man after God's own heart. David was the youngest son of Jesse, an Ephrathite from Bethlehem. While his older brothers found glory as warriors, David was a humble shepherd, spending his days tending sheep in the rolling hills. Yet, even as a boy, he displayed uncommon courage, fending off lions and bears with nothing but a sling and his faith in God. Little did David know, his days in the fields were preparing him for something much greater. One fateful day, the prophet Samuel arrived in Bethlehem, sent by God to anoint the next king of Israel. Jesse paraded his sons before Samuel, confident one of his elder, stronger sons would be chosen. But God had other plans. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, Samuel declared. David, ruddy-faced and still smelling of sheep, was called from the fields and anointed as God's chosen king. Years passed, and David's life seemed to continue as before, until the Philistines threatened Israel. Among their ranks stood Goliath, a giant warrior whose taunts paralyzed the Israelite army with fear. David, delivering food to his brothers at the battlefield, heard Goliath's blasphemies and felt a righteous anger stir within him. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? David demanded. Despite being just a boy, David volunteered to face the giant. Armed with only a sling and 5 smooth stones, David rejected Saul's heavy armor, trusting instead in the Lord's power. As Goliath charged, David slung a stone with precision, striking the giant in the forehead. Goliath fell, and David's victory ignited the Israelites, turning the tide of battle. David's fame spread quickly, and King Saul grew jealous. Though David served Saul faithfully, playing his harp to soothe the king's troubled spirit and leading his armies to victory, Saul's envy festered. It became dangerous for David to remain at court, especially after Saul's attempts on his life. During this time, David formed a deep friendship with Jonathan, Saul's son. Their bond was unshakable, even as Saul's hatred for David grew. Jonathan risked his own life to warn David of his father's plans, forcing David to flee into the wilderness. In the years that followed, David became a fugitive, leading a band of loyal followers as Saul relentlessly pursued him. Despite numerous opportunities to kill Saul, David refused, saying, "I will not lift my hand against the Lord's anointed." His faith and patience were tested as he waited for God's promise of kingship to be fulfilled. Eventually, Saul and Jonathan fell in battle against the Philistines, leaving the throne of Israel vacant. David, mourning the loss of his beloved friend, was crowned king of Judah, and later, all of Israel. His reign began with triumph, uniting the tribes and establishing Jerusalem as the nation's capital. But David's story is not without its flaws. As king, he became entangled in a web of sin and betrayal. His lust for Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, led to adultery and murder. When the prophet Nathan confronted him, David was crushed by guilt. He repented deeply, penning Psalm 51 as a cry for God's mercy, "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." Despite his repentance, the consequences of his actions reverberated through his family. His son Absalom led a rebellion against him, forcing David to flee Jerusalem. The weight of his past mistakes and the loss of his son haunted him, but David clung to his faith, trusting in God's unfailing love. Through battles, betrayals, and triumphs, David's life remained a testament to God's grace. From his humble beginnings as a shepherd to his reign as a flawed yet faithful king, David's story is a reminder that God's plans often unfold in unexpected ways. David's triumphs and trials were far from over. As his reign expanded, so did the complexities of his life and leadership. After securing Jerusalem as the city of David, he sought to bring the Ark of the Covenant to the capital, signifying God's presence among his people. The procession was grand, but tragedy struck when Uzzah, a man tasked with steadying the ark, touched it improperly and was struck dead. David's joy turned to fear, and he halted the journey. Only after careful preparation and reverence did David succeed in bringing the ark to Jerusalem, dancing before it with unrestrained joy. His wife, Michal, the daughter of Saul, mocked him for this display, creating tension in their marriage that never healed. David's heart burned with a desire to build a permanent temple for the Lord. However, God sent the prophet Nathan to tell David that this honor would not be his but his son's. Instead, God made a covenant with David, promising that his descendants would reign forever, culminating in the Messiah. This promise filled David with awe and humility, and he praised God for his faithfulness. As David's kingdom grew, so did his reputation as a warrior king. He led Israel to numerous victories over their enemies, including the Moabites, Ammonites, and Philistines. Yet, it was during this time of prosperity that David's greatest failure occurred. One evening, while walking on the roof of his palace, David saw Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, bathing. Consumed by desire, he summoned her, committing adultery. When Bathsheba became pregnant, David attempted to cover his sin by calling Uriah back from the battlefield, hoping he would spend time with his wife. But Uriah's loyalty to his fellow soldiers kept him from going home. Desperate, David orchestrated Uriah's death by placing him in the front lines of battle. Once Uriah was dead, David married Bathsheba, thinking his sin was hidden. But God saw everything. He sent Nathan to confront David with a parable about a rich man who stole a poor man's only lamb. When David angrily condemned the rich man, Nathan declared, "You are that man." David was devastated, confessing his sin and pleading for God's forgiveness. Though God forgave him, the consequences of his actions were severe. Bathsheba's child died, and turmoil plagued David's family. One of the darkest chapters of David's life came when his son Amnon assaulted his half-sister, Tamar. David was furious but failed to act decisively, leaving Tamar's brother Absalom to take matters into his own hands. Absalom murdered Amnon and fled into exile. When he returned years later, his resentment toward David festered, leading him to stage a rebellion. Absalom's uprising was devastating. David, heartbroken yet unwilling to harm his son, fled Jerusalem with his loyal followers. The journey was a humbling reminder of the cost of his sins. As Absalom's forces pursued him, David prayed for God's intervention. In a tragic turn of events, Absalom was killed in battle, his long hair catching in the branches of a tree as he fled. Despite Absalom's betrayal, David's grief was overwhelming. "Oh my son Absalom! My son Absalom! If only I had died instead of you," he cried. David returned to Jerusalem, but his later years were marked by continued strife. His kingdom faced challenges from within and without, yet he never wavered in his devotion to God. As he aged, David prepared for the transition of power to his son Solomon, ensuring a peaceful succession. He gathered materials for the temple Solomon would build and gave him instructions to remain faithful to God's laws. In his final days, David reflected on his life, a life of triumphs and failures, victories and losses, all under the guiding hand of God. He composed psalms of praise, repentance, and thanksgiving, leaving a legacy of worship that would inspire generations. Though David was a man after God's own heart, he was also deeply human, marked by flaws and failures. Yet his story is a testament to God's grace, showing that no one is beyond redemption. His life foreshadowed the coming of the Messiah, the ultimate king from David's line, who would reign forever. David's story continued to unfold with a tapestry of intricate relationships, conflicts, and triumphs, each event weaving a deeper understanding of his character, his faith, and his flaws. As the king matured, his legacy was shaped not just by his victories in battle but by the relationships that defined him as a leader, husband, father, and servant of God. After the rebellion of Absalom, David sought to restore peace in his fractured kingdom, but his household was far from harmonious. His relationship with his wives and children remained strained.